Have you ever sat in your living room, looked around, and wondered, is this the life I imagined for myself at this age? Maybe your kids are grown and busy, the house feels a little quieter than it used to, and you've found yourself asking whether you should move in with them, or whether you'd just be in the way. You're not alone in wondering, and you're definitely not wrong for thinking that maybe, just maybe, living alone in your later years isn't such a bad idea after all. Today we're going to talk about something that touches more hearts than most people realize. Why living alone in old age isn't just possible, but in many cases, it's the best choice you can make for your health, your happiness, and your dignity. Let me start by saying this. Wanting to be independent isn't selfish. It's wise. It's brave. And for many people, it's the beginning of a more peaceful, joyful, and fulfilling chapter in life. I want to share a story with you. It's about a woman named Helen, now in her 70s, who, like many, grew up believing that a good parent lives with their children when they get older, that it's a sign of love, of family. For a while, that's what she did. After her husband passed away, she moved in with her eldest son, David. At first, everyone said it was just temporary, but weeks turned into months. David's wife was polite, but always distant. Helen started doing chores to help out: dishes, folding laundry, making tea. She told herself it was fine. After all, she wasn't there to be waited on. But soon, the polite smiles wore thin. She was told to keep the TV volume down, to stay quiet during video calls. Her daughter-in-law gently hinted that Helen's pension should be shared, since she was using electricity, food, and space. And when Helen gave what she could, she noticed something. The gratitude didn't grow, it vanished. So she tried her luck at her younger son, Eric's home. He was a little more affectionate, at least at the start, but within weeks, the pattern repeated. The expectations grew. Then came the request, $10,000 to invest in a business. "Just a loan," he said. "You trust me, don't you, Mom?" She gave it, because that's what parents do. But when the business didn't take off, so did the warmth. Her son grew distant. Her room became colder. And when she refused to sell the house she still owned, her last real asset, he grew angry. "You barely use it," he said. "Why are you being so selfish?" Selfish. That word stung. She had spent her entire life giving, and now, in her weakest years, when she needed comfort the most, she was suddenly seen as a burden. A guest in the lives of the children she raised. Then, one winter morning, Helen collapsed in the bathroom. A stroke. If it hadn't been for a kind neighbor visiting next door, who knows what would have happened? She spent 2 weeks in the hospital, and not once did her sons visit together. They came briefly, separately, and each time left quickly with an excuse. That's when she decided, this isn't how I'm going to live. Helen moved back to her old house, the one she and her husband had poured their sweat and savings into. She used the last of her savings to hire a part-time helper. She began walking slowly around the neighborhood, sipping tea on the porch, listening to the birds again. And for the first time in years, she felt like herself. And something surprising happened. Her health started improving. Her mood lifted. Her hands, once stiff from inactivity, grew steadier. She began painting again, something she hadn't done since her 20s. Now, I'm not telling you this story because I think all children are ungrateful or that families are bad. Not at all. There are many loving families who care deeply and do everything they can. But what I want to remind you is this: your life is still yours. And you don't owe your comfort, your money, or your peace of mind to anyone, not even the people you love most. Living alone doesn't mean being lonely. It means choosing peace over pressure. It means having a space that's truly yours, where you can wake up when you like, decorate how you please, and make decisions without feeling like a visitor in your own life. Of course, it can be scary at first. The silence is louder. The empty rooms echo more. But silence isn't your enemy. It's your companion. It gives you time to think, to rediscover parts of yourself you may have buried while taking care of everyone else. If you've ever felt like your opinions are dismissed, your presence barely noticed, or your needs quietly resented, then maybe it's time to reclaim your life. Not out of anger, not out of bitterness, but out of quiet, grounded strength. Helen, like many others, discovered that old age can be a time of blooming if you let yourself step into the sunlight. And what helped her the most? It wasn't just space, it was ownership. Ownership of her time, her choices, her money, and her home. That last one is important, because too many elders give away their homes and savings to their children while they're still alive, thinking it will make things easier for everyone. But when you give away your safety net, you also give away your voice, your independence, and sadly, sometimes even your dignity. Helen told me something once that I'll never forget. She said, "If I had sold my house and handed over everything, I would have ended up in a nursing home, or worse, completely dependent on people who didn't want me there. But because I held on to what was mine, I was able to rebuild my life when I needed it most." Your home isn't just walls and windows. It's your fortress, your freedom, and your reminder that you've earned the right to decide how you spend these precious years. So if you're at a crossroads right now, wondering whether to stay where you are, move in with your children, or try something new, I want you to pause, breathe, and ask yourself, what kind of life feels peaceful to me? What kind of space lets me feel like me? It's okay if the answer surprises you. It's okay if it's different from what your friends or siblings have done. This stage of life isn't about what others expect. It's about what gives you energy, what makes you smile, and what keeps you rooted in joy. Because if you're not living for your own peace now, then when? Let's talk about what truly matters next. Sometimes people ask, but what if something happens to me while I'm alone? It's a valid question, and it comes from a place of concern. But here's something worth thinking about. Being alone doesn't mean being neglected. In fact, many elders who live with their children still face neglect, just behind closed doors. What matters more than who you live with is how you're cared for, and whether the people around you genuinely want to care for you, not because they have to, but because they choose to. When that care is absent, no number of people in a house will make you feel seen. Helen once said that the most painful moment wasn't when her son asked for money or when her daughter-in-law stopped speaking to her. It was when she realized her presence in their home made no emotional difference to anyone in it. She was like a ghost in the hallway, quiet, careful, always trying not to be a burden. But that's no way to live. Now let's be clear, many children love their parents. They may just be overwhelmed by work, bills, parenting their own children, health issues, and sometimes they assume you're fine because you don't complain. That's what Helen did. She kept smiling, kept saying, "I'm okay," until one day, she wasn't. That's when she realized, no one knows your needs better than you do, and no one will protect your dignity if you don't protect it first. When Helen moved back into her home, she made a quiet vow to herself, not just to live, but to live well. That meant starting with the basics. First, she hired a part-time helper, not out of luxury, but necessity. She needed someone to cook a few meals, help her clean, and be nearby during her physical recovery. At first, she worried it would be awkward, or that she'd feel judged. But instead, something unexpected happened. The helper respected her space, didn't criticize her clothes, didn't sigh when she asked for help opening a jar, didn't snap at her for taking a little longer to walk from the kitchen to the table. Just patience, just kindness. Helen started sleeping better, eating better, laughing more. And you know what else changed? Her relationship with her children. Without the constant tension of sharing a roof, visits became warmer. Her sons no longer saw her as a responsibility, but as someone to look forward to seeing. She noticed how they lingered longer when they stopped by, how her granddaughter curled up beside her on the couch to hear stories from Grandma's house. Not Dad's house where Grandma sleeps in the back room. No, this was her home, her safe haven. That's the magic of boundaries. They don't push people away. They create a space where love can breathe. Let's talk about another woman, someone I think you'll relate to. Her name was Margaret. She was 69 when she realized she was exhausted, not physically, but emotionally. She had spent her life raising 6 children, cooking, cleaning, teaching, working 2 jobs. And when she retired, all she wanted was to rest. Just a little. Her children were all grown. Some were married, some lived nearby, some far away. But one by one, they started calling her for help. "Mom, can you watch the kids this week? Can you help with the bills until we get through this month? Can you come stay with us for a while? We need someone at home." Of course, she said yes. Because that's what moms do, right? Years passed like this. She moved from one child's house to another, always packing, unpacking, always grateful, but never fully settled. She started noticing things, how her presence created little tensions, how her daughters-in-law avoided eye contact, how no one ever asked what she wanted. It was always assumed that Margaret would do what was needed. Then one day she overheard something. Her sons were arguing about who would get stuck with her during the holidays. That night she cried, not out of anger but heartbreak. She didn't want to be a burden. She just wanted to be loved. So she made a choice. A bold one. She found a modest apartment, close to a park and a small market. She moved in with nothing but her suitcase, a rocking chair, and a box of family photos. And for the first time in years, she exhaled. Really exhaled. She learned to cook for one, to drink her coffee on the porch, to take slow walks under the trees and talk to the birds. And in time, she found her rhythm again. One afternoon, her daughter called. "Mom, you sound so happy. What's your secret?" And Margaret smiled and said, "I remembered who I am." That's what living alone can do. It gives you back your name, your voice, your pace. Of course, it's not about pushing family away. It's about creating space to appreciate them better, without the stress of constant dependence or unrealistic expectations. Because let's face it, no matter how loving your children are, they have their own lives. And that's okay. You raised them to be independent. Now it's your turn to be the same. You don't need to prove your worth by being everyone's helper. You've already done more than enough. Now is the time to put your own needs first, not out of selfishness, but self-respect. Start small if you need to. Maybe it's organizing your finances so you feel more in control. Maybe it's fixing up that guest room into a cozy personal space. Or maybe it's simply choosing to stay where you are instead of moving in with your kids even if they insist. Say it with me. My peace matters. Say it again. My comfort is not negotiable. These aren't just words. They're declarations. Promises you make to yourself when the world tries to make you shrink. Because you deserve more than survival. You deserve joy, comfort, freedom. And it starts with knowing that your best years can still be ahead of you, not because someone else creates them for you, but because you claim them. Helen once told me something powerful. She said, "When I finally stopped waiting for my children to care for me the way I cared for them, I made peace with my life." That kind of realization doesn't happen overnight. It takes courage. And sometimes it takes heartbreak. But it leads to something truly freeing, the ability to live for yourself again. You see, there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is when your heart aches for connection and no one seems to answer. But being alone, when chosen intentionally, is a kind of freedom. It means you get to decide what your day looks like, what you eat for dinner, what music plays in the background, how long you stay in your pajamas on a rainy morning. It's not isolation, it's independence. And that independence is one of the most precious things we have as we get older. Without it, even a house full of people can feel like a prison. But with it, even a quiet home can feel like a sanctuary. When you live alone, you don't have to ask permission to live your life your way. You don't have to adjust your habits to fit into someone else's schedule. You don't have to worry about being too slow or too quiet or too old. You just get to be yourself, unapologetically. Of course, that doesn't mean you cut people off. Far from it. In fact, living alone often creates more meaningful relationships, not fewer. Because when your life isn't tangled in daily conflicts or quiet resentment, you begin to appreciate the moments of connection even more. Helen started hosting Sunday dinners at her place. Nothing fancy, just a warm table, home-cooked food, and stories from the past. Her children came not out of guilt, but because they wanted to. And when they came, she was relaxed, joyful, radiant. That's the kind of energy people want to be around. Not the energy of someone who's been run down trying to fit into everyone else's world. She also began to reconnect with old friends, women she hadn't seen in years. They would sit on her porch, drink ginger tea, and talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes they'd laugh until their sides hurt. Sometimes they'd sit in silence, just grateful to not have to explain themselves. One of the hardest things about getting older is realizing that the world moves on whether we're ready or not. Our children grow up, build lives, make choices we might not understand. And while we still love them deeply, clinging too tightly only leaves us feeling frustrated and left behind. But when we loosen our grip, when we let go of trying to control how close or far they are, something incredible happens. We start to feel free. We start to notice the beauty around us again, the way the sun filters through the window in the afternoon, the way music sounds better when no one's telling you to turn it down, the way your favorite chair feels after a long walk. These small pleasures, they add up. And soon you begin to realize that a simple life isn't a lesser life. It's a full one. You don't need a house full of people to feel loved. Sometimes all it takes is one sincere phone call. One visit where someone holds your hand and listens. Or one moment, alone with yourself, when you feel completely whole. Helen told me she had one regret, not trusting herself sooner. She had spent years believing that a good parent must live for their children. But now she knows. A wise parent teaches their children by example, even in old age. By living with grace, by protecting their dignity, by showing that life doesn't stop when the nest is empty, it just changes. And if you still have your own nest, hold on to it. Keep it warm, keep it safe, keep it yours. Because having a place that's truly your own is more than comfort, it's power. It's the ability to shape your days, guard your boundaries, and choose joy over obligation. There's another story I think you should hear. It's about a woman named Anna and her mother, who lived alone after retirement. Anna was busy, too busy, if you asked her mother. A fast-paced job, constant meetings, always somewhere to be. But she loved her mother deeply. She didn't call every day, and she didn't always visit on weekends. But every week, without fail, she sent something. A box of fresh fruit, a soft scarf, a small bottle of perfume. Sometimes just a handwritten card that said, "Love you, Mom." Her mother kept all of it. Every ribbon, every note, every box. And one day, when Anna came home after a long absence, her mother had already prepared her favorite meal, tomato soup with stuffed meat and hot ginger tea, the kind she used to make when Anna was still in school. But when Anna arrived, the food was untouched. The house was quiet. Her mother had passed peacefully that afternoon, alone in the home she loved, after preparing a final gift of love. Anna found an old wooden box tucked away in a drawer. Inside were childhood keepsakes, drawings, a necklace, a note. It simply read, "For my daughter. I lived well. Now you must too." That kind of love, the kind that doesn't cling, doesn't control, doesn't demand, is the most powerful kind there is. And it's born from peace, from independence, from knowing that our worth isn't defined by how needed we are, but by how fully we live. So if you've ever doubted whether living alone is safe or right or good enough, let me say this: it can be more than enough. It can be beautiful. It can be peaceful. It can be the chapter of life where you finally exhale and say, "This is who I am." And now, maybe you're sitting there with a quiet realization forming. Maybe a memory just came to mind. Maybe you're thinking of your own story, the years you gave, the choices you made, the times you stayed silent just to keep the peace. If so, I want you to know something. It's never too late to choose differently, to begin again, to live more gently, more freely, more for yourself. We often hear that growing old means losing things, strength, health, relevance, but that's only one side of the story. The other side is this: aging also means gaining something precious: perspective, clarity, and the right to choose peace over pressure. If you still have your home, your voice, your savings, and your wits, you have more power than most people realize. And if you've already given those things away, it's not too late to reclaim your boundaries. Even small changes, like saying no to a request that drains you or setting limits on how long you stay at your children's home, can restore your energy and dignity. Living alone doesn't mean turning your back on your family. It means living in a way that lets you appreciate them more fully, without resentment, without obligation. When visits are optional, they become more joyful. When you care for yourself first, you model strength. And when you maintain control over your space and time, you stay rooted in your own worth. One of the greatest gifts you can give your children is the example of a life well lived. A life where you don't lose yourself in the name of sacrifice. A life where they see that joy doesn't depend on being needed, but on being whole. And yes, there will still be hard days. Days when the silence feels heavier than usual. Days when you miss the noise of a full house. But there will also be golden afternoons filled with sunlight through the window, your favorite song playing in the background, and a hot cup of tea warming your hands. In those moments, you'll realize you haven't lost anything. You've simply made space for something new. Helen once said, "I used to think I needed my children to take care of me. But now I see what I needed was to take care of myself, so they wouldn't have to feel trapped." Now we love each other freely, not out of duty, but because we want to. That's what this life can become. Not a waiting room for the end, but a sanctuary of presence. A place where you rediscover yourself without all the noise. A chapter where your days are your own and your nights are peaceful. So if you're watching this and wondering what step to take next, begin here. Look around your space and ask, "Does this feel like mine?" Then look inward and ask, "What do I need to feel strong again?" It could be as simple as rearranging the furniture, scheduling a walk with a friend, or buying that cozy chair you've been eyeing for years. You've earned the right to feel at home, not just in a house, but in your life. And to those of you who may feel a little behind, who worry that the best years are already gone, take heart. The best years are the ones where you live intentionally, where you know your worth, where you stop apologizing for taking up space. You've spent a lifetime being there for others. Now it's time to be there for yourself. If this video has spoken to you in any way, if you found even a small part of it helpful, please take a moment and let us know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or even just a simple, "I'm here, and I'm listening." That one comment could help someone else feel a little less alone. And if you haven't already, I invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep creating more content that brings clarity, strength, and comfort to this beautiful, wise, and often overlooked stage of life. Remember, you are not forgotten. You are not invisible. You are still learning, still growing, still worthy of love and joy. You are allowed to live your days with dignity, even if that means doing it on your own. You're allowed to protect your peace, to laugh in your own kitchen, to rest in a bed that belongs to you and no one else. Here's to living your truth, honoring your wisdom, and choosing the life that feels right for you. Not because someone else said so, but because you know it's time. Take care of yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And never forget, your best life can begin right now, exactly where you are. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, live well. You've more than earned it.